At our 10-year high school reunion, I returned not as the underachiever everyone once pitied, but as a rising young entrepreneur. I was determined to make Luke, the guy who always looked down on me, eat his heart out. But then I heard someone whisper, "Luke? He died. That winter right after we graduated." I had flown all the way back from the US just for this reunion, and even offered up one of my private villas as the venue. Our homeroom teacher, who used to roll his eyes at me, now patted my shoulder with a grin and said, "Jennifer Delaney is the most accomplished entrepreneur our class has ever produced." No one saw it coming, the bottom of the class girl rising to the top before anyone else. Even the girls who used to snub me were now crowding around, trying to touch my limited edition luxury handbag, calling me President Jennifer like we were best friends. I kept my eyes glued to the door through all the flattery. 39 classmates had arrived. Just one hadn't shown up, Luke, the academic god of our high school, the jerk who once posted my love letter on the school bulletin board. He wasn't here. I had two main goals for this trip back home. First, make Luke regret every awful thing he ever said to me. Second, find the mysterious classmate who had secretly helped me back then. I'd already imagined it all like chapters in a novel. Chapter 1, Return. Chapter 2, Revenge. Chapter 3, Gratitude. But the leading man of my revenge plot? He hadn't even shown up. One of the girls nudged my arm. "President Jennifer, why are you staring at the door? Everyone's already here." Luke's name almost slipped out of my mouth. I pressed my lips together and turned away. The teacher struggled to drag something out from behind him. It was a massive time capsule. Inside were tin boxes we had sealed together before the college entrance exam, buried for 10 years, and now finally being returned to their owners. The class president still wore his greasy, slicked-back hair and the same obsequious grin. He helped the teacher pass out the boxes, neatly stacked inside. Back then, I was always the last to get my graded assignments. This time, mine was the first handed out Jennifer, neatly labeled. I stared at the childish sticker on the lid, now faded and yellowing. I held my breath and opened it. Just as I suspected, empty, except for a single piece of paper. To Jennifer, 10 years later. "You're 27 now. Make Luke regret everything." The handwriting was forceful, the rage practically embedded in the ink. I looked around. My classmates were all teary-eyed, reading the messages their younger selves had left behind. Only one box sat alone on the table, unclaimed. A name was stuck to the lid, Luke. The handwriting was lazy and careless. He still hadn't come. He really wasn't coming. God knows how long I'd waited for the moment I could finally say, "Never underestimate the underdog." I let out a slow breath and flipped the paper over. Another sentence. "Jennifer, find the anonymous classmate who helped you all along. Thank him." The bitterness of my youth surged back. High school had been rough. To afford textbooks, I'd skip breakfast and dinner. But someone X used to leave strawberry milk and bread in my desk. When some thugs started targeting me, he was the one who handled it behind the scenes. That love letter Luke had plastered on the board, it was meant for X. He had done so much for me. I always imagined he was a quiet, kind, unassuming guy who never wanted credit. I never found out who he was, not even by graduation, but he had to be someone from our class. No one else could have known exactly what I needed every single time. And now, everyone except Luke was here. I clenched my fists and stood up, scanning every face. Back in high school, someone named X secretly helped me a lot. "If you're here, can I finally know who you are?" The room went still. Everyone stared at me, confused, trying to remember, but no one stood out. Maybe X had forgotten what he did. Maybe he never meant to be known. He helped me without leaving a name, and even now, he still wouldn't step forward. I raised my voice. "X, are you here?" No response. Then someone accidentally bumped the table. Luke's box fell to the floor with a loud thud. The lid popped open. Paper cranes, tiny straw rabbits, Plastic cherry blossom twigs spilled everywhere. I froze. They looked so familiar. They were the little thank you gifts I had given X cheap but heartfelt. I stood there stunned for several seconds. What the hell, Luke? Why would he take my gifts for X? Slowly, I walked over and knelt down, carefully picking everything up and putting it back into the box labeled with Luke's name. Every gift I'd ever given to X over 3 years, nothing was missing. There were even more trinkets I recognized, plus an old flip phone tucked inside. My anger surged. First, Luke exposed my love letter, and now this? I was ready to confront him. Right now. Finally get my revenge. Where's Luke? I asked. Silence fell. Snow tapped against the glass window. After a long pause, someone answered, Luke? He died. That winter after we graduated. And just like that, the reunion ended on a cold, bitter note. Outside the villa, snow fell quietly. I stood under a streetlight, flakes glowing in the golden light. My phone buzzed with a notification. Happy 27th birthday, Jennifer. X. That's when it hit me midnight had passed. Today was my birthday. Every year, for as long as I could remember, I'd received a birthday email signed from X, right on time. I had always thought I'd find X before I turned 27, but he still wouldn't show himself. I lowered my head, staring quietly at Luke's time capsule in my arms. Then, a strange thought crept in. What if Luke was X all along? I opened his box again. In the very corner sat that old flip phone. I held the power button, and to my shock, it turned on. There were no messages on the phone, just a mail app. On the cloud, almost 100 pre-written emails sat in the outbox. All uploaded 10 years ago, all scheduled to be sent every year on December 21st. Some had already been delivered. The format never changed. Happy 18th birthday, Jennifer. X. Happy 19th birthday, Jennifer. X, and so on, all the way to Happy 100th birthday, Jennifer. X. Jennifer, even when you're 100, you still have to be happy. After high school, my life gradually turned around. Now, people call me President Jennifer, and my future's bright. My friends had already thrown me a lavish birthday bash. Business partners had been sending me well wishes nonstop. But somehow, nothing hits quite like that simple Jennifer from X. Everyone else calls me Jennifer, or Miss Jennifer, or President Jennifer. Only X learned by chance during our senior year that I actually don't like the name Jennifer. It's my mother's surname. I should have been named just Jennifer. Slapping Luke in the face and finding X that was the whole reason I came back. And in the end, I accomplished neither. The time capsule held so many things. Meticulously folded paper cranes, tangled earphone cords, a straw bunny, a flip phone, and a plastic cherry blossom branch. I picked up the cherry branch. It was just as cheap and flimsy as I remembered. A faded wish note was still stuck to it. I looked up, and it felt like the snow was falling just on me. The wind whipped my hair into the air. I closed my eyes and made my first wish as a 27-year-old. If birthday wishes really came true, then I wished I could see you once more across time and space, my unknown X. I had been dazed since opening my eyes. Students were walking across the stage, moving props, dressed in blue and white school uniforms. Somehow, the snow had taken me back to high school. Faded memories resurfaced. This was our freshman year school play. Our class had put on Time's Snow White asterisk. They were rehearsing now. I looked up, and there they were, the branches. I played a rough, plastic-looking cherry tree, squatting silently in the back. If I remembered correctly, then Luke was the one playing Snow White. I hadn't seen him in 10 years. In my memory, Luke had always been a boy. I lifted my gaze, looked past the students crossing the stage, through the dust dancing in the light, and there he was, right in front. He had broken through the cage of time, full of youthful energy. Luke leaned lazily against a backstage prop. his school uniform washed almost white. The light kissed the edge of his face. In his hand, a red apple gone nearly black. It must have been the prop meant to poison Snow White. I stood up and pushed through the crowd, cherry branches on my head swaying wildly. I finally stopped behind him. Luke heard the noise and turned around, single-lidded eyes, a teardrop mole beneath one, bathed in golden light. I had meant to ask if he was X, but something snapped in my brain, and instead I blurted out, "Luke, do you have a crush on me?" He bit into the apple with a loud crunch, then froze. Several seconds passed in silence. Then he looked at me, deadpan, and said, "Who even are you?" I forced myself to answer, "Jennifer." He straightened up, thoughtful. "Jennifer? The one who scored 38 in math?" I reminded myself over and over to respect the dead. I swallowed my anger and held back from punching him. One thing was clear. Luke couldn't possibly be X. There must have been a mistake. Maybe that lazy jerk swapped boxes by accident when we buried the time capsules. X was introverted, kind, invisible. Luke was arrogant, punchworthy, distant. They couldn't have been more different. We were polar opposites. I bought my way into Lanchang #1 high. So did Luke, but the school paid for him. It took a massive scholarship to get him to stay. In my life, I've only accepted 2 handouts from my father. One, he paid the sponsorship fee for Lanchang #1 high. That's when I met Luke. 2, he helped me apply for college in the US. I never saw Luke again after that. Luke and I were the kind of people where if I reached for a dish, he'd spin the table. If I took a sip, he'd hit the brakes. I stole his drama role in freshman year. He posted my love letter in senior year. Petty revenge, back and forth, our feud didn't end until graduation. If he hadn't died, maybe it would have gone on even longer. Freshman year, Luke was the best-looking guy in class. That's why they made him Snow White. I was a background cherry tree he walked past. I wasn't happy with my role, not at all. But X, ever helpful, made my dream of being the lead come true. Considering how his fate turned out worse than mine, I figured this time I'd let Luke keep the Snow White role. I stood quietly near the wish wall at the back of the classroom, still in that blue and white uniform. The wind rustled dozens of sticky notes. I spotted mine. It had no marker, no name. Other kids had written things like, "Hope someone can solve this function for me." Only mine had a single bare-bones sentence. "I want to be a princess." Such a simple wish. Later, X must have seen it and made it come true. But this time, I decided to revise it. I peeled the note off, crossed out princess, and wrote in knight. Then I stuck it back on the wall. I kept my eyes on everyone who passed by the wish wall, but no one gave my note a second glance. I left for just a moment to get water. When I returned, someone had added new writing. Beneath my scrawled, "I want to be a knight," someone had quietly signed it with a simple X. X said yes. Whether I wrote princess or knight, he always said yes. And still, he never wanted me to know who he was. I turned around in a daze. The classroom was full, everyone busy. My eyes skimmed over the few people I suspected. I always thought X might be a guy named Tony, quiet, gentle, introverted. He fit the image. I went up to talk to Tony. Just as I tapped his desk, a gust of wind blew the curtain aside. I followed the motion with my eyes. Luke sat by the window. Outside, the trees were lush and the cicadas buzzed. The wind ruffled his bangs. The others were loud and rowdy, but he was detached, fingers pale and idle as they spun a pen. Luke looked up without meaning to, and met my gaze. He clicked his tongue, annoyed, and turned away. What a weird guy. And yet my wish came true again. X always made things happen. This time, I'd become the knight who crossed mountains to save the sleeping princess. During the official play performance, the auditorium was packed with students and teachers. All I could see were blue and white uniforms and young faces. My role was small, honestly. But watching Luke forced to play Snow White? That was a treat. If looks could kill, we'd all have dropped dead. I watched him quietly. Watched him, alive and well. Annoying as ever, but he didn't deserve to die. Finally, it was my turn. I drew my plastic sword, crossed mountains and rivers to reach my sleeping princess, battled through bandits, and arrived at last. Luke lay there with a stony expression, surrounded by cheap, brightly colored fake flowers. I knelt beside him and improvised. "Princess! Your knight Sakura has arrived. Sorry I'm late. I'm here to rescue you." I saw his jaw tighten. The corner of his eye twitched. According to the heavily innovated script rewritten by the student in charge of arts, the next scene was where the knight kisses the princess, who then slowly awakens. It didn't need to be serious, just a symbolic lowering of my head would do. Luke really was beautiful. He didn't look out of place playing Snow White at all. His skin was pale, his nose sharply defined, and his slender fingers held that deep red apple. It was like a fairy tale had sprung to life, the slumbering prince leaping out from the page. Then, the sleeping princess in front of me dropped the apple, reached over and moved my mic away, his lips barely parting. "Jennifer," he said flatly, "mind your decency. You're staring too much." His face practically screamed, "Don't get any ideas." I was just about to retort when I lost my balance and crashed forward straight onto his lips. Luke, the first Snow White in history to be kissed awake by a headbutt from a knight. My last thought before blacking out was, great, now Luke's going to hate me for another 3 years. Ah, open wider. That was the first thing I heard when I came to. I instinctively opened my mouth wide, only to hear 2 people laughing. The school nurse pointed at me and said, "Not you." She was checking Luke's mouth, and he still had time to glance over at me with a deep, amused smirk. Luke wasn't seriously injured, just a split lip from my head. Some ointment would fix it. The nurse couldn't figure out why I fainted. Only I might have guessed it, maybe this timeline was rejecting my presence. Just then, someone entered the room. It was Tony. My eyes lit up. Luke gave me a light glance. I asked, "Tony, are you here to check on me?" The shy boy blushed instantly and quickly replied, "No, I came to bring medicated oil for my desk mate." Luke gestured for him to come closer and whispered something. Tony shot me a weird look, then ran off without even looking back. We were both basically done with our checkups and should have left already. As we stepped out of the school clinic, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What did you say to Tony?" I asked. "I told him if he didn't run faster, you'd rope him into tutoring you in math." He deflected, then lightly touched his swollen lip. "Jennifer, your head is seriously hard." Guilt and embarrassment bubbled up inside me. "I can't repay you right now, but in 10 years I'll apologize properly. By then, I'll be a successful entrepreneur. I'll be rich." Luke paused, for once not mocking my wild dreams. Instead, he asked, "So, have you gotten everything you wished for?" I thought about it and said yes. 10 years from now, Jennifer won't need X anymore. Her future is bright, and she already has everything she wants. I walked quite a ways ahead before realizing Luke had stopped where we'd parted, smiling gently. "Good," he said. My main mission was still underway, but X was hiding too well. Judging from how fast Tony wanted to get away from me, he clearly wasn't X, so I pivoted to my other goal. Originally, I wanted to make Luke regret everything, but now, I had a new plan. I wanted Luke to be grateful. Luke needed to live. He had to be there at the 10-year reunion. But the way things were between us, he wouldn't take anything I said seriously. So I focused on getting close to him. I pestered him to tutor me in math, but the more we studied, the worse our relationship got. I didn't give up. I insisted on sitting next to him on the school bus every day. Because of our increasingly heavy workload, Lanchang No One High provided free morning shuttles. Both Luke and I rode them because we were both poor. Luke always sat in the very last row. The seat next to him was always empty. Even when other students had to stand, no one dared sit beside him. I thought it was just because he was the unreachable top student. Later, I learned there was another reason they were scared of him. Luke's father was a recently released murderer, infamous in Lanchang for killing his wife. But this time, I insisted on sitting next to him. Luke sat facing the window, headphones on, listening to music. On the bus, he seemed especially distant and detached. He watched the scenery outside blur by, like he already knew how his story ended but had no choice but to follow the script. He never spoke to me, and strangely, I didn't dare interrupt. Maybe it was just me, but time flew by in a blink. Suddenly, we were in our second year. It felt like blank pages were being flipped by the wind too fast to leave a mark. One day, I gathered my courage and asked, "Luke, what song are you listening to?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned and replied in a flat voice, "The National College Entrance English Listening Test." He handed me one earbud. I stared at his pale fingers pinching it, and that familiar high school fear of English exams came flooding back. Honestly, I didn't want to take it. Luke, seeing I hadn't reached for it, started pulling his hand back. I quickly grabbed it, brushing his fingertips, took the earbud, and sighed as I put it on, then froze. A soft male voice sang, "How could love alone entitle me to own Mount Fuji?" He lied to me. That wasn't an English listening test. It was Eason Chan's Times, under Mount Fuji *. I turned to Luke, only to find he was already watching me not the least bit guilty. His lips curled in a rare smile. He looked smug, pleased with himself. Total egomaniac. I didn't expect it, but when the song ended, it started again. The same one. That's when I realized his MP3 had no English exams, no other songs, just Times Under Mount Fuji Times, on repeat. On this endlessly looping school bus, Luke listened to a single looping song, riding the circle of life and death. One day, someone would ask him what he was listening to. I moved closer, close enough that our shoulders touched, and I caught the faint scent of soap on him. "Is Mount Fuji a special place or something?" I asked. Luke hesitated. "Maybe it's where cherry blossoms are the prettiest." The bus arrived. Everyone got off. Luke did too. He packed away his earphones and that old MP3 with one song and walked past me to the front. I sat there, then called out just before he stepped off. "Hey, Luke." He turned around, jawline sharp and clean. I shouted, "Don't go to the riverside. Stay away from your dad. Trust me, this time I'm right." Light and shadow flickered across his face. He didn't answer. No matter how many warnings, no matter how much you prepare, unless something breaks the loop from outside, some endings never change. Luke's expression was lazy, a smirk playing on his lips as he inexplicably said, "It's enough. You sitting beside me, that's already enough. You don't have to save me." As soon as the words left him, the scene before me vanished. The bus and Luke were blown away like mist in the wind. I was back in the heavy snow of the mountain villa. I almost believed it had all been a long, vivid dream, until I looked down and saw the wish note stuck to the cherry blossom branch had changed. "I want to be a knight." That was my wish. X. That was his reply. In the next instant, the note and the branch shattered together. The earphone cord from the time capsule had also snapped, vanishing just like the wishes before it. I could barely stand, nearly collapsing into the snow with the tin box in my arms. There wasn't much left inside. If the time capsule could really change the past, I had to be fully prepared to save Luke against all odds. But just as I took a step forward, the snow and wind suddenly stopped. I had a strong premonition. Once the storm ceased, the things in the box would lose their magic, just like any other nostalgic trinket. I pulled out my phone. Of course, this private villa was up on a mountain, with no signal at all. I lowered my eyes and clutched the tin box, cloaked in snow. After I graduated high school, my dad, in a rare moment of conscience, sent me to the U.S. for an integrated bachelor's, master's, and PhD program. Later, I helped him expand his overseas business. My career and social life flourished. Both X and Luke were left behind in my shadowy, chaotic past. As long as I didn't dig any deeper, I could remain the bright future. Jennifer, President Jennifer, Miss Jennifer. As long as I stopped here, I could pretend nothing had ever happened. But if I stopped here, I'd never find out what happened to the person who called me Jennifer. I opened the tin box like opening Pandora's box. Luke died in the deep winter of our graduation year. The homeroom teacher said he'd injured his hand before the college entrance exams and never took them. He didn't even re-enroll. At the time, I was busy preparing to go abroad. Later that winter night, he was pushed into the Lan River by his father. By the time they pulled him out, he was already cold. I was across the ocean then, struggling through school, swearing silently that one day I'd make Luke regret everything. Luke had it worse than I did. His father had gone to jail for murdering his wife, and got out during Luke's high school years for good behavior, then casually reclaimed custody. I'd seen Luke's father harass him for money more than once. Anyone who got remotely close to Luke would be targeted by that terrifying man. So Luke hardly talked to anyone. He remained a fixture of my past while I kept moving forward. There were times I could barely remember what he looked like. It wasn't until I was thrown back into high school that I realized how bright and alive he had been. Luke's box was stuffed with paper cranes, so many they nearly filled it to the brim. I remembered that well. Senior year fees were expensive. The money my mom left before she passed wasn't enough. I had to skip meals. Yet somehow, there was always a bottle of milk and bread in my desk. I was poor, too poor to repay it, so I folded paper cranes, leaving one in the drawer each time. Every time X left me milk, he'd take a crane. Suddenly, the wind picked up again, and the cranes in the box scattered into the air. I reached out to grab them, but the cold wind and snow forced my eyes shut. When I opened them again, I was seated in our senior year classroom, sunlight slanting in. The duty chart on the blackboard said it was Friday. School had been out a while. The room was empty. I reached into my drawer, and sure enough, found a bottle of milk. Simple packaging. That brand had been discontinued long ago. The Jennifer of today wouldn't drink anything that cheap anymore. I stabbed in the straw and took a long, fierce gulp. If I could freeload off X one last time, I wasn't going to waste it. I wandered outside, kicking pebbles in the fading sunlight, mildly frustrated. It was already senior year, and I still hadn't found X. I'd practically ruled out everyone in class. If I couldn't figure it out soon, I'd have to start suspecting our balding homeroom teacher. From the gate, I heard faint commotion. I squeezed through the curious onlookers and peered inside. Even though they were just watching, everyone stood far back, like afraid of catching something dirty. They whispered, "That's Luke and his murderer dad." Luke stood there, spine thin and straight. The man was furious. "Where's your scholarship money? All that cash, where is it?" Luke didn't seem to notice the crowd's judging stares. He gave a bitter, mocking smile. "Didn't you already take it all?" "No way. You must still have some. I saw you buying milk." The man lunged and tore Luke's backpack from his shoulder. Books fell out, along with a flurry of paper cranes. Luke didn't move a muscle, letting the man yank and scream. But the moment he saw the cranes hit the ground, his hand, hanging by his side, turned pale from how tightly he clenched his fist. I was more shocked than anyone. I looked at the empty milk bottle in my hand, then at the cranes on the ground. I couldn't make sense of it. On instinct, I hurled the bottle at the man, yanked Luke behind me, and shouted, "What the hell? Where are the school guards? Don't they deal with psychos?" Luke's father was raging, but when he caught sight of Luke behind me, something spooked him. He didn't dare take another step. The school guards finally arrived, dragging the man away and dispersing the crowd. The paper cranes rolled into the dust, and Luke's secrets spilled out in the ugliest possible way. I still hadn't fully processed it. I crouched down and stuffed the cranes and fallen textbooks back into Luke's bag. Suddenly, I understood. Luke's time capsule wasn't mislabeled. It was his box all along. I looked up. I meant to ask if he was X, but for some reason, I blurted again. "Luke, do you have a crush on me?" I braced myself for humiliation. Last time, he mocked my 38 in math. This time, he'd probably call me delusional. Luke stood there in his blue and white school uniform, sunlight spilling in from his side. He lowered his head, no longer hiding anything. "Yes," he said. "I do. I have a crush on you, Jennifer." My fingers slipped. The bag fell with a thud. Luke crouched down, picked it up, and started packing the trampled paper cranes back in. Eyes downcast, he said, "So please, don't come near me anymore." "Why?" I asked hoarsely. Luke gave a faint smile. "I don't believe in high school romance. Arrogant jerk." "Luke?" His lashes were long, casting shadows over his eyes. He said, "Jennifer, go live the future that's meant for you. Be that happy, successful, young entrepreneur. Your path is lined with flowers, don't look back." 17-year-old Luke was desperately poor. So was 17-year-old Jennifer. But that poor Luke noticed Jennifer's struggles and quietly used what little money he saved to leave her milk in her drawer. That poor Luke and poor Jennifer both could have had such a bright future. I looked at Luke and slowly said, "Dear X, how do I reach your future?" He replied, "Jennifer, don't walk into my future. I have no future." Ever since I realized Luke and X were the same person, ever since I heard Luke say he had a crush on me, he'd been avoiding me, refusing any kind of connection. Even the strawberry milk in my drawer stopped showing up. Next, Luke would injure his hand and miss the college entrance exams, then fall into the Lahn River that winter after graduation. I felt like both had everything to do with his father. Helping Luke get rid of his father became my top priority. When I looked at the calendar, I realized it was already May of our senior year. The atmosphere was tense with exam prep. I didn't have much pressure. Soon, my dad's secretary would probably contact me to discuss going abroad. But around this time, that's when trouble was supposed to find me. My mom helped build my dad's empire from scratch, and after he cheated and drove her to death, I lived with my grandma. After she passed, I lived alone in her old house. When the area was marked for demolition, I refused to move. The real estate developer sent thugs to loiter outside my home and scare me. Since there was no real physical harm, the police could only offer verbal warnings. Back then, it was X who quietly handled it for me. But this time, I waited and waited. Not only was I not harassed, I didn't even see a single thug around. On a rainy night at the end of May, I jolted awake from a nightmare, drenched in sweat. Instinctively, I drafted a text to the police and hit send. I rushed to the door, the damp air rushing in. I grabbed the umbrella by the entrance and stepped into the rainy night. This was an old alley. Not many people lived here anymore. At the corner, I heard a scuffle and glanced through the rain. Luke was slamming a man's head into the wall. A few other thugs surrounded him, but even outnumbered, he held his ground. The man getting beaten, I knew him. It was his father. Through the wall, I heard him say, "I asked around about that girl. Her dad's loaded." "Smart of you, kid." Luke slammed his father's head into the wall again, voice low. "What do you want?" The fight paused. I heard his father say, "Luke, fight underground matches for me. I need a lot of money. If you won't give it to me, I'll go to that girl." Rain poured down. Luke said, "Fine," the man added. "Forget about those college entrance exams. Once you're flying high, I won't be able to control you," Luke replied. "Fine." "I don't trust you," he sneered. "In the next 2 months, you'd better injure your hand. I know you might sneak in the test and shoot to the top," Luke said again. "Fine." The man laughed. If your mom had listened like you, I wouldn't have had to hit her. My call to the police hadn't brought them yet, but I was already fuming. I wanted to kill them all, so that's how Luke got hurt. That's how he missed the exams. I couldn't take it anymore. Worst case scenario? I'd just get beaten up. I grabbed a long bamboo laundry pole leaning against the wall, probably some grandma's, and charged through the rain. Get the hell away from him! I yelled, swinging wildly. The pole cracked against multiple bodies. Cries of pain and curses erupted. They didn't know where this crazy girl came from. These guys all had knives on them. But from afar, sirens suddenly wailed. Their feet froze mid-step, and they scattered like sewer rats seeing daylight. I tossed the pole aside and wiped the rain off my face, only to see Luke had collapsed, struggling to stand with help from the wall. I dropped to my knees and helped him. Princess, your knight Sakura has arrived. Sorry I'm late. I'm here to rescue you. Princess Luke looked unimpressed, spring rain sliding down his chin. He took my hand and pressed it to his cheek, where a long bruise was already swelling. Who the hell hit you that hard? I'm furious! I raged. Luke's eyes drifted to the bamboo pole I had dropped. You, he said. I think you did it on purpose. Knight Sakura brought no sword her weapon hit indiscriminately. I gently touched his right wrist, bony and ice cold. Thank God, nothing seemed broken. Luke's hand was precious, the hand of a future valedictorian, but he pulled it from my grasp and said softly, Didn't I tell you not to interfere with me? I looked him dead in the eye. Luke, I came back this time with only one goal, not to humiliate him, not to find X. I came to steer you toward the path you were meant to take. The Lan River in deep winter is too cold. Don't get pushed in again, Luke. I had outrun time itself to get back to your past. So please give me a chance to reach your future. Adults overpower teenagers like gods against mortals. For normal problems, teachers can help. But people like Luke's father, unstable, violent, already with a body count, aren't easily dealt with. No one knows what a man like that will do when he snaps. Luke's father had a terrifying hold over him. Not just me, anyone who got close to him became a target. When my dad's secretary reached out, I requested a meeting with the father I hadn't seen in years. He agreed. He looked at me like I was a stranger. To me, he looked oddly familiar. After he'd sent me to the U.S. for the full academic package, I'd been working to expand his overseas market. We weren't exactly out of touch, but I always addressed him as Mr. Delaney. I got straight to the point, trying to keep my tone level. Mr. Delaney, I'm not going abroad. And the shares my mother left me, the ones you've been secretly managing, I don't want them either. I won't bother you again. I want to use everything I have to make a deal. Mr. Delaney looked surprised. I said, I want to trade it all for Luke's safety. I want that madman of a father far away from him, gone for good. I didn't want the private villa. I didn't want the rare leather luxury handbags. I didn't care if people called me an outstanding young entrepreneur anymore. Mr. Delaney chuckled. Do you know why I suddenly sent you abroad? Half a month ago, someone named Luke came to see me. Said his murderous father had set his sights on my daughter. To avoid disaster, he suggested I send you abroad immediately. I thought about it, figured I owed you something anyway. And this Luke kid, he's interesting. Even made a 100-page portfolio planning your college applications and future career path. I asked him what he would do if I said no. He smiled and said, either way, his life was cheap, he'd just go down with his father. How could someone only 17 say something so final? And in the end, it really did become a prophecy. I never realized he was sinking into the mire himself while lifting me into the sky, pushing me toward a bright, wide future. My head was buzzing, but I still repeated myself instinctively. I said, Mr. Delaney, are you still willing to make this deal? He said, deal. And the moment he said it, I felt the weight on me lift, as if something new had been given the chance to begin. Mr. Delaney said, he kept calling you Jennifer classmate. I asked Luke why he didn't use the Delaney surname, and he said you didn't like it. It was your mom's last name. Jennifer, I may have neglected you all these years, but never forget, you're still a Delaney. But I suddenly shivered and asked, what did he call me again? Jennifer, classmate. But I remembered it differently. From the start of 10th grade, both X and Luke had only called me Jennifer. It wasn't until right before graduation that I told X I didn't like the surname Delaney. I asked him that in his birthday greetings, he should never include the last name again. Just call me Jennifer. Jennifer, classmate. But this time, when I returned to this timeline with the help of the time capsule, Luke had been calling me Jennifer, classmate from the very first meeting. No affection. To him, it was just a name. I ran outside. Those trapped in time relived the same past, cycling again and again through life and death. Scenes flashed by me. Countless memories surged back. This was a sealed timeline. Time only flowed from Luke's 10th to 12th grade, from meeting Jennifer, classmate, to falling into the river. Over and over again, Luke always remembered. He had tried to break free, but no matter how things changed, he always ended up plunging into the icy river that final winter. When Luke said he had no future, he meant it. And when he said he was truly happy hearing about Jennifer, classmate's bright future, he meant that too. He was the one left behind, frozen in time. Yet no matter how many times the loop repeated, Luke never gave up one thing: being her nameless ex, guiding her toward her dazzling future. I didn't know how long I ran, through the busy streets of the city, until I finally stopped at the corridor behind the school's bulletin board. Something had already been posted there. It looked like the love letter I'd once written to X, back when I gathered the courage before graduation. Luke was walking over with his bag slung over one shoulder. He passed the board, then suddenly stopped. His fingers touched the letter as if about to peel it down. So it wasn't him who posted the letter in the first place. I just happened to witness this moment and misunderstood him for years. Luke pulled his hand back, resting his fingers against his chin, smiling faintly. He stared intently at the love letter taped up in the board. Sunlight scattered gently over his brow and lashes. So really, I can't be blamed for the misunderstanding. Anyone seeing that would have thought it was that smug jerk who'd posted it. I took 2 steps toward Luke, who was once again preparing to tear down the letter, only to stop short. A ponytailed girl had appeared and yanked Luke's left hand, shouting, "Luke, you posted my love letter on the board? You bastard! I'm gonna make you regret it." That was the real 17-year-old Jennifer, classmate, face still full of youthful sharpness. I stumbled back and looked down at myself, nothing, just a void. Luke peeled off the letter and gave a light smile. "If you study abroad in the U.S., it'll probably piss me off to death." Jennifer, classmate, stomped her feet. "Not a chance. I'm not going abroad. I'm gonna stay right here, make you buy me milk forever, annoy you so bad you'll regret me for the rest of your life." Luke pulled a pen from his pocket with his left hand and casually scribbled something in the blank space at the bottom of the letter. Then he turned and looked at 17-year-old Jennifer, classmate, or maybe, past her, directly at me. "Jennifer, classmate, I like you." Morning light split off a new parallel timeline from the long river of memory, driving out the intruder who didn't belong. I had never felt so lucky, and never so envious. My Luke the princess, my knight Sakura, had been saved. I collapsed into the snow, phone falling from my pocket. Its faint glow lit up. The 21st of December 2022, 12:10 a.m. Only 10 minutes had passed, but I had clearly relived 3 whole years. The letter I had been clutching fluttered in the wind. I looked down, sure enough, it was a love letter. The first line, "Dear X, I like you. I hope you'll tell me who you are." At the bottom, someone had scribbled something. This time it wasn't just a vague mark. It was a bold, unmistakable signature, Luke. "Luke has received your letter. Dumb Jennifer." I'm Luke. Haven't figured it out yet? The label with Luke's name on the time capsule was blown aside, revealing two names on the reverse: X and Jennifer. This was the time capsule of X and Jennifer, but now it was empty. The wish notes, the cranes, the earphones had all vanished with the wind. Only the love letter, once torn to pieces and carefully taped back together, remained as proof that none of this was a dream. A lyric echoed from the long, tangled cords of our shared headphones. We once wandered down snowy paths. Why do good memories bring tears? I had saved the Luke from that other timeline, broken the endless loop. I had played his knight during the freshman year play, listened to music with him on the school bus sophomore year, picked up his scattered paper cranes junior year, rescued him in the pouring spring rain, and in the end, protected both him and the girl he loved. I had created a warm, parallel world for my ex, my dear river princess. It was the perfect fairy tale ending. I tried to stand, but fell again into the snow. Still, in this life, I had missed my chance with Luke. He was that annoying classmate I remembered, who had hidden all his gentleness under the alias of X. He turned me from a plastic cherry tree into a princess. He sat beside me for 3 years, listening to times under Mount Fuji **. His cranes had been trampled without dignity. He was beaten in the spring rain. He went to my indifferent father, begging for a brighter future for me. He missed the college entrance exam because of his injuries, and in the end died in the winter river beside the father he'd hated all his life. I never lost anything. I was still Jennifer, President Jennifer, Miss Jennifer. At the reunion, everyone praised me as a successful young entrepreneur, but I had never envied anyone more than that Jennifer classmate from the other timeline. That poor girl had a poor Luke by her side. I stood up, finally steady. I placed the love letter quietly into the tin box. On the outside, the handwriting was careless, Luke. But when I flipped it over, the writing was much gentler. X and Jennifer. Jennifer classmate was the secret Luke had kept hidden. On the eve of my 27th birthday, I attended a high school reunion. The person I hated most and the one I was most grateful to both were absent.